is to put it would be in the middle of a wall.
Drill's going in now. Hold it. They hit something at 11 feet.
That could be where the treasure's hiding.
I detected gold.
Wow. 100%.
Yeah.
This is huge.
Well, there you go, guys.
In the dead of night, Oak Island trembled. The drilling rig screamed once, then fell silent, as if the earth itself demanded its stop. A low hum rolled beneath the island, deep and resonant, like the land was alive and breathing for the first time in centuries. Cameras caught Rick Lagina frozen in shock, eyes fixed on the pit as hydraulics died without warning. His lips barely moved, but the words that escaped sent shivers through everyone watching. "It's opening." Seconds later, black water erupted from the shaft, not the expected mud, but a flood laced with shimmering gold fragments, flakes flashing under floodlights like fireflies born from the underworld. Panic spread as Charles Barkhouse staggered back, swearing he heard voices in the water, chanting in tones that matched ancient Micmac warnings of the Watchers. For over 2 centuries, Oak Island had defied men with collapse and trickery. But this was different. This wasn't failure. This was the island yielding, and everyone knew it. The weight of prophecy crashed down on the crew. 7 must die before the treasure is revealed. 6 lives had already been claimed by Oak Island since 1795. Was the curse finally paid, or was it waiting for one more soul? As they debated, a raven descended, black wings cutting across floodlights before landing on the crane arm, silent and staring. To locals, it was the oldest omen of all, death's messenger marking the turning point. The timing chilled even the skeptics. Exactly 228 years had passed since Daniel McGuinness first struck Earth in this very place. Now, in 2025, the island seemed to choose its moment of surrender with eerie precision. Arguments flared in the pit. Was this the work of pirates desperate to hide stolen plunder? Or Spanish sailors guarding New World bullion? Or something older, an order of warrior monks who carried both gold and secrets across oceans? Rick silenced them with a steady voice, his words cutting through the roar of the pumps. This isn't coincidence. This is destiny. Historians warned that curses were not metaphors, but warnings woven into the very traps designed centuries earlier to protect what lay hidden. And now, those traps were stirring awake. Into the silence, the borehole camera descended, its cable humming as it sank more than 180 feet. What it revealed turned belief into certainty. Walls, smooth, precise, and impossibly ancient, came into view, carved stone blocks, bearing faint but unmistakable crosses. This was no accident of geology, this was construction. White crystalline deposits gleamed as if stars had been frozen underground, reflecting light where no source should exist. Then the camera swept across iron rings set into stone, the kind designed to secure ropes, as though this chamber had always been meant to open again, under ritual, not to remain buried forever. The engineers shook their heads. The chamber was sealed under pressure, an engineering feat centuries beyond the skill of any supposed builders. The discovery was staggering, but it was the final image that shattered doubt. Just at the edge of the lens, beyond the crystal shimmer, past the carved crosses, something glimmered, a sliver of unmistakable brilliance. Gold. The crew froze, their breath caught. It was there, waiting. The order came fast. The mechanical claw groaned as it descended into the newly breached vault, steel fingers reaching into the dark abyss below. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of metal scraping stone, the silence of centuries pressing in. Then, with a sudden jerk, the claw rose. The floodlights caught it, an object clutched tight, dripping with water, encrusted with mineral residue. Gasps erupted as it swung into view. A perfect square ingot of gold, its face stamped with the cross pate, the sacred mark of the Knights Templar. No one spoke as it was lowered onto the platform, not until Rick himself reached out with trembling hands and lifted the weight of history from the machine's grip. The gold gleamed like captured sunlight, every inch too precise, too perfect to belong to any age they had studied. Metallurgists rushed forward, their equipment hissing as they sampled the surface. Numbers began to flicker across digital screens, each reading higher than the last, until one of the scientists removed his glasses, visibly shaken. 99.8% pure, he said, his voice almost breaking. The statement hung in the night air like thunder. Such purity was not just rare for the medieval period, it was impossible. Gold of that refinement belonged to modern industry, not to the hands of men who lived 8 centuries ago. And yet here it was, proof defying every timeline. Rick's hands shook as he stared at the ingot, fingers tracing the cross burned into its surface. His voice cracked, heavy with emotion. This isn't pirate gold. This is holy gold. Around him, silence held for only a moment before chaos broke. Reporters scrambled, phones buzzed, and before dawn, the first helicopters were circling overhead, their searchlights joining the island's own floodlamps. By morning, Oak Island was no longer a quiet archaeological dig. It had become the epicenter of the world's attention. Satellite trucks lined the causeway, networks broadcasting live across every continent. The gold ingot was appraised quickly at nearly $7 million, but even the appraisers shook their heads, knowing that the value of its history, its origin, its symbolism, dwarfed any dollar figure they could imagine. For historians, this wasn't an object of wealth. It was a relic tied directly to ritual treasure. Treasure meant not for trade, but for safeguarding something sacred. If the ingot was the spark, the discovery that followed was the inferno. As the excavators pressed further into the chamber, their claws scraped against heavy wood, reinforced with iron bands blackened with centuries of age. The first chest they hauled up groaned under its own weight, its seams sealed with wax and pitch, the preservation astonishing. When crowbars finally cracked it open, the crowd expected coins, jewels, relics of conquest. Instead, the chest yielded something infinitely stranger. Layers of oilskin wrappings unfurled, protecting rolls of parchment, each scroll impossibly intact, their ink still dark against parchment. The air filled with the scent of oil and time, the smell of words hidden for centuries, waiting to breathe again. Latin spilled across the surfaces, curling with flourishes unmistakably medieval. Other scrolls bore old French script, some Hebrew, their letters delicate yet commanding. Scholars rushed forward, whispering as they held the documents up to the floodlights. Gasps followed. Symbols, complex geometric forms, mirrored exactly those found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Others resembled illustrations from the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible itself. But among the hundreds of texts, one image stopped everyone cold. A sketch, rendered with painstaking care, depicted the Ark of the Covenant. Radiating lines crowned its form, and arrows drawn across the page pointed west. Not to Jerusalem, not to Rome, but directly toward Oak Island. The weight of the revelation broke Rick. On camera, the man who had spent half his life searching for proof of Oak Island's mystery could no longer hold back tears. He cradled the parchment with reverence, as though touching the breath of history itself. "This," he whispered, "this was never about gold. The true treasure was knowledge, hidden and protected, waiting for us." Around him, his crew bowed their heads, realizing they were not miners anymore. They were guardians of secrets mankind had nearly lost forever. But the island had not yielded so easily. As the second chest was dragged up, a roar shook the vault. Water surged, fast and merciless, erupting through hidden channels carved centuries earlier. Within moments, pumps screamed, alarms blared, and chaos returned with a vengeance. The flood wasn't an accident. It was a trap, an engineered safeguard designed by master builders far ahead of their time. Workers shouted over the roar, water pouring in from unseen conduits, filling the vault with terrifying speed. Divers plunged into the torrent, desperate to save the chest before it was lost. Through the churning black water, one diver's hand closed around something heavy and smooth. He surfaced with a cry, thrusting it above the rising waves, a golden chalice engraved with Hebrew script circling its rim. Cameras caught it glinting against the floodlights, an object of faith and ritual pulled from the jaws of the island's fury. But even as cheers erupted, the water surged higher. It wasn't a trickle, it wasn't a leak, it was a torrent, flowing like an underground river from a source vast enough to drown them all. The pumps screamed louder, engines shaking as they fought to hold back the tide. Yet the pressure was relentless, as though a subterranean reservoir had been waiting centuries to unleash itself the moment anyone dared disturb the final vault. Sparks burst from electrical panels. Workers slipped in the rushing tide, pulled back by frantic hands. The chamber itself groaned, ancient stones shifting as if the island was trying to seal itself again. Rick's voice cut through the chaos, hard and commanding. "Stop! Everyone out. One mistake, and we'll lose both the treasure and our lives." His order froze the crew. Chests were abandoned mid-lift, equipment left to drown. Men staggered up ladders as water swallowed the chamber. The golden chalice, dripping and heavy in the diver's grip, was the only prize carried to safety. Behind them, Oak Island raged, swallowing centuries of treasure back into its depths, daring the intruders to try again. But while the chamber drowned, the world above erupted. The footage of that single chalice, raised from the flood like something torn from legend, ignited a firestorm. Within days, emissaries under heavy security arrived from Spain, France, and the Vatican, each armed with documents and centuries-old claims. Spain invoked the Age of Conquest. France brandished Templar charters sealed in royal wax, while Rome sent cardinals whose words dripped with quiet menace about the Church's duty to safeguard relics of the faith. Helicopters churned the skies, ferrying officials, lawyers, soldiers. Oak Island, once the stage of folklore, had overnight become the center of global diplomacy. The Canadian government scrambled to secure the island, declaring it a protected heritage zone and surrounding it with fences, soldiers, and patrol boats. Yet even Ottawa's bold claims were immediately challenged. Did Nova Scotia own the ground beneath Oak Island? Did the Canadian state? Or did international law apply, since the contents were relics tied to civilizations far older than Canada itself? The debates raged in Parliament while reporters circled like vultures, feeding the public frenzy with speculation that the treasure buried below could total billions. Gold futures spiked in New York and London, speculators whispering that Oak Island could collapse the market itself if its vaults contained even a fraction of what rumors now promised. And rumors spread like wildfire. Religious leaders stepped forward, declaring the impossible had been proven. The Knights Templar had survived their 14th century purge, had sailed west with their secrets intact, and had built a vault on the edge of the New World. For centuries, such theories were dismissed as conspiracy. Now, in the wake of ingots stamped with their cross-pate, relics inscribed with sacred words, and documents pointing to Jerusalem itself, the world faced a truth too large to ignore. What had been myth yesterday was fact today, and faith scrambled to reconcile centuries of denial with the evidence on the table. Pilgrims flooded Oak Island's causeway, some kneeling and praying, others chanting, still others waving signs of protest, demanding the treasure not be hidden in museums but restored to the faithful. Protesters clashed with believers, treating the island not as history but as holy ground, a battlefield between politics, faith, and ownership. Through the chaos, the Laginas pressed forward. Engineers stabilized the flooded chamber, pumping out water and reinforcing walls with steel. And in that fragile silence after the storm, the true heart of the vault emerged. Sarcophagi lined the chamber's edges, their lids carved with Maltese crosses and angelic forms, as though stone itself had been transformed into scripture. When the first lid was shifted, the air filled with gold's muted gleam. Crowns inlaid with rubies and emeralds, swords with jeweled hilts that caught the light like fire, reliquaries sealed with careful precision. They weren't objects of wealth. They were ceremonial, symbolic, relics meant for kings and priests, not for trade or plunder. One reliquary drew the loudest gasps, a crystal case within which rested what scholars insisted were fragments of the true cross, wood darkened by age, but preserved as though it had been hidden away only yesterday. Others contained bones, wrapped in linen, embroidered with Latin prayers. Each artifact shifted the weight of history, proof not just of Templar survival, but of their mission. They had not hidden treasure for greed, but safeguarded relics for faith. And then came the discovery that changed everything once again. Behind a false wall, a hidden panel gave way with a hollow crack, revealing a spiraling staircase carved downward into stone. Its steps curved into shadow, vanishing into a second chamber far below. The crew froze, staring into the abyss. Rick's voice broke the silence, steady but awed. This wasn't a hiding place. It was a sanctuary. The sanctuary's secrets unfolded with the next chest. Within, carefully preserved beneath layers of wax and silk, was a parchment map unlike any ever seen. Its ink traced a journey across continents, from Jerusalem westward to Scotland and onward across the Atlantic to Oak Island. Each leg was marked with Templar sigils, each waypoint a place of rumored mystery. Roslin Chapel, the ports of La Rochelle, and finally the shores of Nova Scotia. Scholars pored over the parchment, their voices trembling with what it implied. The Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred relic of the ancient world, had been moved not once, but many times, passed hand to hand across centuries until Oak Island became its vault. The revelation ignited fevered debate. Some historians argued the Ark had been stored here temporarily, hidden while awaiting transport deeper into the New World. Others declared Oak Island was its final resting place, the culmination of the Templars' secret mission after their persecution in Europe. Rick himself speculated aloud that Oak Island was never meant to hold the Ark forever, but to act as a waypoint, a safeguard on a longer trail across oceans. His words struck like lightning. If Oak Island was then where was the destination? The evidence grew stranger still. Among the chests, beneath a layer of coins and seals, lay a massive iron key. It was thick and ornate, its bow engraved with the Latin words Deus vult, God wills it, the battle cry of the Crusades. The key's teeth were jagged, shaped not for a door, but for some mechanism larger, older, and unknown. Theories exploded overnight. Some said the key unlocked a deeper chamber beneath Oak Island, one not yet touched. Others swore it was part of a larger device, a relic that would only make sense if the Ark itself was found. Conspiracy theorists flooded the internet with claims. Was the Ark still buried deeper, protected by the second staircase? Or had it already been moved centuries ago, carried further west into the uncharted wilderness of the New World? Speculation spread faster than facts, but one thing became certain. The Oak Island mystery was no longer a provincial legend. It had become the most important and dangerous archaeological discovery in modern history. And as the debates raged, the diggers produced the evidence no theory could ignore. The weight of gold against oak-stained hands felt unreal. Oak Island was no longer just a dig site. It was a crucible, reshaping the very narrative of civilization. Estimates flooded in, appraisers counting by the bar and scholars by the parchment, and both arrived at the same conclusion. The wealth was beyond measure. The ingots alone, dozens now stacked in guarded crates, were valued conservatively at $150 million. But the documents, so fragile they could only be handled with gloved hands, were declared beyond all earthly price. Their contents rattled the foundations of belief itself. Fragments of lost gospels thought destroyed by Rome, prophecies tied to Christ's descendants, and scrolls describing secret crusades never recorded in any chronicle. Marty Lagina stood before the cameras, his voice unsteady as he admitted this was the greatest archaeological find since Tutankhamun's tomb. The Canadian government ringed the site with fencing, soldiers, and drones, and yet Rick would not budge. When pressed on whether he would auction even a single artifact, his reply was final. "It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to mankind." But the island had not given freely. Strange malfunctions plagued every corner of the operation. Drones tumbled from the sky as if struck by invisible hands. Floodlights sputtered, batteries drained, workers collapsed without warning. And then came the storm. Islanders swore it was the fiercest in half a century, waves hammering the shores, winds howling with voices that carried across the night. They named it the seventh death, for everyone knew the curse. 7 must die before the treasure would yield. That very night, news spread through the community that an elderly resident, long tied to Oak Island's lore, had passed away peacefully in bed. It was the 7th. For Rick, the meaning was undeniable. The price had been paid, the prophecy fulfilled. When dawn finally broke, a rainbow stretched directly across the money pit, refracting its colors onto the drenched dig site like a seal of covenant. To many, it was no accident of weather. It was divine acknowledgement. And so the legend that began in 1795 with Daniel McGuinness's first shovel finally climaxed in 2025 with Rick Lagina's trembling hands. The world crowned him the man who solved the unsolvable, who ended Oak Island's 228-year riddle. Universities from Oxford to Harvard scrambled to create new programs, entire departments dedicated to the Oak Island codices in real time. Religious leaders convened emergency councils, some proclaiming validation, others denouncing heresy, as the documents peeled away centuries of guarded doctrine. But Rick, standing apart from the headlines, made no claim of finality. He gazed at the mouth of the pit as cameras rolled, his words quiet but unshakable. This was never the end. It was only the beginning